definitely, Lord help. But is there a way for us to be able to help ourselves? For those who don't know, I'm going to throw it out there. I was at the Glenville Festival, and I received a very disturbing video. Uh, it caused me to have to stop everything that I'd planned on doing and head out to Euclid, Ohio. This is not the first problem that has occurred in Euclid. A lot of people were thinking, wow, how'd this happen when this is like an ongoing thing? And at least a guest that we've brought into the studio, if you could definitely let everybody out there know who you are. We will be getting to our phone lines at 216-578-1490. You can text us at 216-804-7462. For those who are amongst the millions on www.newstalkcleveland.com, we appreciate you. But right now, you spoke so eloquently, brother. If you can let people know, and trust me, this is not the first time. Last night definitely wasn't the first time, but if you can let people know who you are and impart some of the people out there that you represent and what's on your mind, we'll appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. My name is Christopher McNeil. I'm a civil rights and criminal defense attorney here in Cleveland, Ohio. And amongst other things, I'm a concerned black man, and I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Cleveland. And it's no secret, based on what we saw in Charlottesville, based on what we saw in Euclid, based on what we are continuing to see across Northeast Ohio and the entire United States of America, that we are dealing with an issue of national security, and that being police violence against predominantly people of color. And me and my comrades through Black Lives Matter, as well as many of the other civil rights attorneys, and some of the affinity groups such as the National Lawyers Guild, such as Showing Up for Racial Justice, we are committed to combating these constitutional intrusions that are occurring all too often today.
I feel you. I hear you. Before we do anything else or go any further, I love to dispel rumors and myths and all of that. I heard that Black Lives Matter is just a bunch of troublemakers just out to tear everything asunder, man. What do you say when you hear that type of thing? And what is the underlying preface for Black Lives Matter?
Well, it's funny that you would mention that, because I guess depending on what your position is regarding all of this, then maybe we are here to raise some trouble. Sometimes you got to raise some trouble in order to get relief. Let me tell you, this is the United States of America. This country was founded on the ideas that we are a nation of laws and not men, that we are free. We are to be free from government oppression and tyranny. This nation was founded upon the premise that we ought not to be taxed by the crown without being offered legal representation. We engaged in a violent and bloody American Revolution, basically because the rich folks didn't want to pay taxes anymore. Now let me link it to what we are witnessing today. We are seeing unarmed men and women being gunned down, having their lives taken. We have such injustice in our criminal justice system today as it relates to civil forfeiture, as it relates to access to counsel, as it relates to having fair legal standards held in an equitable fashion as it relates to all persons. And to me, I guess if you consider the scope of the deprivation of rights that many of us are enduring against the backdrop of why this nation was formed in the first place, I will tell you that we have a license to raise some trouble on this issue. Now, I would also like to elaborate on another misconception that is often put out there as it relates to Black Lives Matter. We are not here to argue that only Black Lives Matter. We are not only concerned with the mistreatment of African Americans or even only people of color. We are concerned with the overall oppression of every minority group in this country, whether it's women overall, whether it's the LGBTQ community, and especially if it relates to African Americans. And the reason we have to say Black Lives Matter is because it's becoming clear and evident, based on the attitudes from the top of the leadership in this country, from the President Donald Trump himself, all the way down through the arms and channels of the federal government, to the state houses in Ohio, and to even the minds and consciousness of some of the men and women who serve as jurors who refuse to see misconduct when it would occur. And it is my belief that we are dealing with a specter which is harder and more elusive to wrestle with than ever before, due to the fact that we have embarked upon this so-called colorblind society. Our specter that we wrestle with is this cognitive bias that infests the minds of many white Americans. Whenever they see an African American, there is a perception of guilt. There is a perception of disobedience, that they deserve each and every assault and battery and deprivation of right that occurs because they simply will not comply. And that is not the case. And that being the scenario that we are in, we will continue to zealously advocate until change occurs.
You know something? I can appreciate you being here because I see all the phone lines lighting up at 216-578-1490. So we're going to go to the first person out there. How you doing?
How are you doing?
Excellent. What about yourself?
Pretty good. I want to compliment you on the show first. I think it is a great show. I like how professional it has become over the years and informative. So you have an attorney on the line, and I'd like to ask him if, number one, Black Lives Matter Cleveland, we salute them, but we ask them to loosen up on their stringent rules for people being I was told they have to go through a scrutiny process. We want that open to the community because we don't want them singling out people and denying them access. Not that I want access. Hello?
We're listening, ma'am.
Okay, so let me ask you something, young man. There needs to be a consent decree for police reforms in some of these suburban communities like Euclid, University Heights, Shaker Heights. What happened to Eric Brewer was terrible. I don't believe, and I wanted to ask you, do you believe the policeman that pulled over Eric, just by looking at his license plate, had either probable cause or reasonable suspicion to pull him over? And when can we have discussion on seeking interference by the Justice Department relative to all of these suburban communities rather than just Cleveland for police reforms? What is your view on that, please?
Well, first, let me just say that I do not want to dive too deeply into the particular facts of Mr. Brewer's situation because I do not understand all of them. But I would definitely like to address the other issue involving pursuing a consent decree regarding the use of force in some of these suburban counties here regarding the city of Cleveland. Let me first and foremost say that the Department of Justice is usually the vehicle that steps in and initiates these consent decrees through their own investigative efforts where they may believe that there is a pattern or practice of violating constitutional rights. Now, that being the case, you should understand right away the precarious nature that we are all in as it relates to the Department of Justice. Currently, we have a president, Mr. Donald Trump, who has endorsed and ratified police brutality through some of his public comments. We have an attorney general who is in fact the head of the Department of Justice, in Jeff Sessions, who is one of the worst attorney generals as it relates to civil rights. This is a man that Coretta Scott King herself warned that should he be allowed to rise to this position, that there would be grave consequences for minority communities in the United States. Now, that being the case, unfortunately, while I definitely share your sentiment that there ought to be an investigation, and we will demand that the Department of Justice investigate not only Euclid but some of these other problematic localities, I would be struck, shocked, and totally surprised if the Department of Justice would initiate that, because we are currently dealing with a very hostile executive administration. And this alone right now should be a message to all of the people why we need to vote in every election cycle. Because oftentimes, even though you may not like a particular candidate, sometimes 0 is better than -2. And what we have right now is through some voter apathy. We've allowed Donald Trump to take power. We've allowed him to put in some vile individuals who are directly antagonistic to our rights, and it's definitely going to impede our ability to initiate a consent decree. Nevertheless, I know for a fact that my colleagues and comrades will continue to press and fight for one anyway.
And on top of that, Kathy, if you can let us know what's going on upcoming when it comes to
civics in our community is from all age groups, and if more people had a better appreciation for civics, they would understand the movement of the Black Lives Matter and the necessity for it. Have you guys spent any time organizing forums so people have a better understanding of how local to state to federal politics works for the best interest of the citizens?
Well, first and foremost, let me take a little bit moment to kind of crystallize exactly what my role is in the organization. Okay, I am a member of the organization. I am a close friend and associate with all of the key principal organizers. Okay, I do not. First and foremost, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my comrades, Kareem Hinton, Latanya Goldsby, Ryan Brown, and Samaria Rice, who have been working tirelessly and vociferously in each and every one of their endeavors to not only raise awareness but also to educate the community as it relates to those civics. In full disclosure, I'm not a native to Cleveland. Okay, I came from Rochester, New York in the 19th Ward, which is very similar to everything we see in EC. Okay, I'm a child of the crack epidemic, and I say that with a badge of honor only so you can understand that we are brothers in this struggle. Now, as it relates to your specific question, we are always brainstorming and organizing efforts to engage the community as it relates to what their rights are in a police encounter. Okay, I do believe that that is definitely a glaring concern in our community, because too often, even if we're not dealing with the issue of police brutality, we are dealing with an issue where they can use things against us, or we end up being talked into consenting into things that we shouldn't. And because the criminal justice system and police officers in general, they don't tend to function the same way in our community as they do in white communities or in affluent communities. And that particular reason is perhaps why there's such a break in the public sentiment as it relates to attitudes towards police officers. But to summarize everything, we are always looking for new opportunities to raise awareness in the community. And if you want to be a partner in any of that, you can definitely call back, and I'll give you my contact number, and we can talk about any ideas you might have on how we can, bring the message to the people more efficiently.
Maybe. Let me hear the rest of your time on the broadcast. Okay.
No doubt.
All right. And as we go to the next person on there, I have to say that I appreciate the fact when Todd calls in early so he can get. Do you personally feel that if more, I'll say, pastors, particularly black melanated pastors or imams, clerics, if more of them had traveled from, let's say, the inside or behind the pulpit to in front throughout the years, like Martin Luther King, Honorable Reverend did, or many others, if people had traveled from behind the pulpit for maybe the past 30 to 40 years, would there have been a need for Black Lives Matter? Or do you feel that in some cases, because it's been said before that the clergy has kind of dropped the ball, and by doing that, it left a lot of people feeling a little bit frustrated or what have you? What are your thoughts?
Wow, well, that's a lot to digest. But I want to start by just kind of framing this in a way that I think is important in order for us to have a meaningful conversation. I think that there's been a lot of technological revolutions and improvements that have kind of changed the way that we communicate. Okay, so back in the day, in Martin Luther King's time, pastors spent a lot of time, on the pulpit and in their communities working with their congregation. Okay, and so because of that, I would imagine they were akin to grassroots movements because they're dealing with the drama at the time. Now, fast forward to broadcast television, to internet and social media, where now there's a greater celebrity factor associated with becoming a pastor. I think that a lot of these individuals, and I can't speak for all of the cloth, but I think that a lot of these individuals are perhaps busy building their brand, okay? And anytime we get into a position where, you know, I have to monitor my brand, I have to think about what message I put out, what endeavors I undertake, how are these going to affect the public image of me, and as it relates to my ability to grow my church and to put more money in my pocket. Now, I think because of that, we see more reluctance, not only from pastors, but from all sorts of professionals, okay, in order to actually put some skin in the game. And now to kind of get a little bit, you know, more direct on exactly how I feel about whether or not Black Lives Matter would be necessary had we had more involvement, I would say no. I don't think the role of the organization would be as crucial as it is today, precisely because, for lack of a better way to say it, I think that a lot of our traditional and institutional black leadership has fallen asleep at the wheel over the past several decades. I do believe that the advances that we were able to make regarding the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, okay, and the implementation of affirmative action policies, not only at the educational level, but also as sort of a corporate practice. It placates a lot of middle-class African Americans, okay? And so when the people who have the means and the people who have the education become placated because they now have a stake in the status quo, they're not going to be as eager to lose their place at the table by advocating for the injuries that are occurring in the community. And there's also been a bit of a conservative revolution in this country since you know, Ronald Reagan came to power. You know, his presidency kind of symbolized a break from the progressive federal politics in order to make this nation a more egalitarian place for everybody. Okay, and since then, even some of the Democratic leadership we've had have been less than stellar as it relates to embracing certain liberal ideologies to advance egalitarian and fairness. Okay, leadership has become a lot more pragmatic. Okay, and so they're a lot more willing to negotiate and strike a deal in order to be perceived as somebody who's fair and reasonable and willing to work on both sides of the aisle. And honestly, that mentality even affects the way we look at some of these police brutality cases. We can look at a video clear as day, see a man get mounted and pummeled, see a man getting choked out, see a man getting his head slammed against the concrete, you know, while he's doing nothing other than trying to deflect some blows. And you have, and the consensus among most so-called reasonable people will be, well, we gotta wait till all facts come out. I don't know. There's two sides to every story. Well, sometimes there's not two sides to every story. Sometimes it is what it is. Sometimes your eyes are not deceiving you, okay? And I think that what we need, especially from our institutional and traditional leadership in the black community, is a willingness to effectively and aggressively say what it is that you really feel, and not just when we're in company, but also when we're in front of some cameras or in front of some people whose minds need to be changed.
Do you think it's because it would affect membership?
Well, if we look at the trend, membership in churches is down, period.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, I think that a lot of these pastors could do themselves a favor if they kept it real.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if they're not keeping it a stack, then, you know, what am I coming here for? You know, at the end of the day, because the church, at least is the way I understand it, it's about fellowship, okay? It's not just about you giving me the word of God. You know, that's definitely a part of it, but, you know, we can read the Bible and discern, you know, guidance, you know, without needing to attend churches. So as it relates to their membership, maybe if we're talking about mega pastors, okay, who regularly recruit, you know, professional and, you know, high high esteemed individuals to sit in their pews. Perhaps they're afraid to ruffle some feathers, but I can't really speak to that.
Okay. This time last year, it was pure madness. It was the RNC.
Right.
And I was there all the days, and Steve Loomis, the president union, recently said that, I think he was saying it didn't do good because of the media attention. It didn't bring in the revenue that they were thinking because of the media attention. But Black Lives Matter, I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, y'all said that a few days ago at least, or maybe a week before the RNC, there was going to be no participation in it, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
I do believe that was the statement that that was put out regarding protesting the RNC.
Now, is there a particular method to which, I guess, issue or events the Black Lives Matter chooses, and what is that method based on?
Okay, so with this question, I want to be clear that I was not privy to whatever discussion led to that conclusion. So I am not going to give my opinion as it relates to the leadership of the organization and how and why they did what they did. But I will give you my own individual summation of why I believe that was a good strategy. Okay. Listen, what do we stand by, protesting to get the Republican Party as currently construed to do anything? All we would be doing is sending our people into a position where, we're not going to gain anything, but we have a whole lot to risk, as it relates to the
fire,
backlash.
basically.
So exactly. And as it relates to what we can do and what our mission ultimately is in order to change things for the better for our community, I definitely believe that our efforts are more efficiently aimed at local politics, our school boards, our city councils, our mayor's races. And I can tell you definitively that we are committed to ensuring that our issues are at the forefront and that each and every politician who endeavors to hold office, they're going to have to be accountable for this cesspool that we are all swimming in Cuyahoga County, and they better have some answers and some solutions for the way forward. And we're not in the business so much of picking a candidate to get behind, because once you start to do that type of activity, you can easily become beholden to someone. You can easily hold yourself up to being attacked for a policy that you never endorsed or ratified. We're more concerned with making sure that issues get addressed and that politicians be held accountable for either their malfeasance or misconduct.
Now, I don't know if you can answer this on behalf of the organization. But last week a few weeks ago, I went to a labor union event. And I mentioned it prior on the air that they were saying if you protest the ports, they did it in San Francisco, or in Oakland and in South Africa, and it was successful. When Oscar Grant was killed in Oakland, they did it. They received a little bit of success, even though the officer didn't do a lot of time. What is the Black Lives Matter position on, I guess, adding the addition of protesting ports, getting labor unions involved? That way you hurt the economy of that city.
Well, again, this is sort of a question of first impression for me. So it's definitely not something that I've discussed with any of the leadership.
Okay.
But as you're laying this out for me for the first time and I hear it, listen, that sounds like it might be some sort of course of action that might have some legs to it. And I would, just as I invite the previous caller to link up with me so that we can put our heads together and powwow so that we can, look into whether or not this course of action or some other could produce some good results. Listen, I believe in listening to any and every idea that is going to progress our issues and achieve a positive result. And we're always looking to partner with anyone who wants to help us in these efforts, because the reality is we need the community to stand up and come out and join us in this fight, because a lot of our activists are, we've been out here trying to stand with these families, trying to pursue some new policies, trying to apply political pressure in order for us to change things. And we are at a point now where we can only do so much with, you know, the leadership and the numbers that we have. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to please look out for the go on Facebook, find the Black Lives Matter Cleveland page, and please contact us if you're willing to help us move the ball forward.